All right, everybody. Welcome to Norwood Institute of Information and Solutions. All right. This is where you get real insight, practical information, and a mindset that you can apply. All right. Immediately, you can apply it. So, today, what we're going to do, we're going to break down the Georgia Simple Battery Law. Okay. I'm going to walk you through the elements of this charge so you not only understand it, but you'll know how to handle yourself if you ever find yourself in this particular situation. Because a lot of people get confused when it comes to simple battery in Georgia or getting charged with simple battery. All right. And so what I want to do today is I'm going to clear this all up so that you can know how to handle yourself. All right. So let's get into it. Again, Georgia Simple Battery explained. We're going to demystify it, break it all down. And yeah, so hopefully you guys will learn something today on this, okay? All right, so let me see here. There we go. All right, so let's define the threshold of simple battery. All right, let's define this here. All right, so unlawful, intentional physical contact with a person. All right, I'm gonna break that down here in a second. Does not require severe injury or permanent marks. All right, keep that in mind too. It does not require severe injury or permanent marks. All right, focuses entirely on the intent of the action, serves as a foundational misdemeanor in Georgia. All right, so let's take a look at this real quick here. There we go. So let's look at this, man. So unlawful, intentional physical contact with another person. Let me see here real quick. So unlawful, intentional physical contact with another person, and it does not require severe injury or permanent marking. So a lot of people think that in order for them to be charged, if they get into an altercation in Georgia, they think if someone is in your face and maybe poking you in the face or pushing you on the shoulder while they mad at you or they push you, all right, they think that that's not a charge. You can't be charged with it. But actually, you can be charged with that charge, all right, with simple battery, Georgia simple battery. Because again, you got to look at it. It's unlawful, intentional physical contact with another person. So that your intent, you're already in the argument, and maybe what's being said back and forth is further pissing you off, and you intentionally get in the person's face. You might get up in their face and touch your nose with their nose. That can be considered simple battery. All right, you can get in their face and tap them in the face. All right, poke them in the head, mush them. Okay, poke them in the head. All right, that could be considered simple battery because again, it does not require a severe injury. You don't have to be bleeding all out. Okay, you don't have to have slashes all over you, marks, scars, and from fighting and scratching. It doesn't include that. You don't have to have that. All right, you don't have to have any permanent marks. A man grabs a woman on the arm, and all of a sudden, there's no marks on the person, but they're grabbing them. That's also intentional physical contact. There's no injuries, but a person's grabbing you because they're upset with you now. Now they grabbing you by the arm, or they grab you by the face, grab you by your head. No marks left on you, no injuries. That could be considered simple battery. Okay. Okay. Two distinct paths to a battery charge. There's two distinct paths. Okay. Two distinct paths. Let me get this out the way here. So again, no physical pain or injury is required. There's no physical pain or injury required. And I want y'all to keep that in mind because I don't want you getting out there in the street and then you think it has to involve, again, physical pain and injury. It's had to be visible. No, it doesn't. Okay. Again, there's two distinct paths to a simple battery charge. The one path is insulting or provoking contact, and the second path is physical harm. So it can be any one of those on that scale. Okay. So let's go into the insulting or provoking contact. Again, no physical pain or injury is required. Focuses on disrespect, provocation, or offense. All right. Actions, poking a chest. I mentioned that. I mentioned mushing in the head. You can mush somebody in the face. You know how back in the day, maybe they still do it. Some people get mad and all of a sudden they just want to, you ain't nothing. You ain't ish. Right. They might do something like that. Okay. Grabbing a person by the shirt. They so mad they come grab you and come here. They're intentional with it. All right. Also, spitting in a person's face can be simple battery. Yeah, we don't want all that, but it can be considered simple battery. Okay. All right. Now, here's the second path, path 2, physical harm. This also can be part of simple battery. Actual physical pain. If I cause you pain or injury occurs, that's also simple battery. Just like it's simple battery if I just spit on you, left no marks, left no injuries, they both can be simple battery. You can get a simple battery charge if you do either one. All right. Path 2, the physical harm part focuses on the bodily injury. All right. So here's some actions that can be considered on the physical harm side: slapping a person, punching a person. We all know that, right? Violently pushing a person. You push somebody so hard, get off me. All of those can also go under simple battery. Okay. The prosecutor's burden of proof. Okay. Intentional. The act must be on purpose, not a clumsy accident. Okay. Contact, physical touch of some kind must actually occur. All right. Another person, the action must be directed at someone else. Okay. Unlawful. The contact must happen without consent or legal justification. All right. Get those in your mind. Again, for unlawful, the contact must happen the contact must happen without consent or legal justification. Okay. Physical touch of some kind must actually occur. All right. Let's go back real quick. No physical pain or injury, or it could be physical pain and injury. But going into this next one, some type of physical contact must occur. So spitting on another, the spit got on them, that's physical contact, right? Poking you in the chest, that's physical contact. Grabbing you by the shirt, that's physical contact. Grabbing you by the arms, physical contact. Okay. What was another one that I was thinking? Mushing you in the face, physical contact. Punching you, that's physical contact. Slapping you, physical contact. I'll just violently push you, all physical contact. So it goes under the contact. Physical touch of some kind must actually occur. Okay. So how simple battery happens in everyday life. All right. Let's take a look at some situations. Get in a bar argument. That's one. You get in a parking lot dispute. That's another. How simple battery can happen. We all know you get in the parking lot, you at the club, you in front of a building, right? You might be getting ready to go into a movie theater, a concert, and everybody's outside. These are everyday life situations where simple battery could happen. All right. So let's look at the bar argument. Intentionally knocking a drink out of someone's hand out of anger. That's insulting content. And that's another way you can also be charged with simple battery. just throwing a drink on somebody. You know, the liquid that's in the glass or cup, and you get in an argument with somebody. A pure example is when you watch the Georgia Housewives or Atlanta Housewives show. You know, when they was out and about, the girls, the ladies, I don't remember the guys too much doing that, but the ladies were throwing drinks on each other like crazy. Simple assault charge. I mean, simple battery charge, excuse me. Not simple assault, but simple battery charge. They can get charged with that. All right, a parking lot dispute. Shoving someone backward with two hands over a parking space. You get mad. That goes on. Some people get pissed off. You just get ready to pull in a parking space, or someone came and drove around real fast and pulled in your space, and you get pissed off with them. All right, you having contact with them, face to face argument. You know, everybody's posturing. Yo, that was my space. I don't know why you pulled in there. Then all of a sudden, someone gets pushed. Okay, so that's another everyday life scenario where this can happen in. So another one is a heated debate. Aggressively poking a coworker. You could be at your job and do that. Poke them in the shoulder. You're having a debate about something. You start getting mad. You poke your coworker in the shoulder to make your point. That could be considered insulting, provoking contact. Same thing if you mush that same person in the face. You might have been cool with them before, but during that debate, that heated argument or heated debate, maybe that person took it as insulting and provoking. Okay. So aggravating factors that escalate the crime. Let's look into that. So vulnerable persons. Now, age 65 or older, keep these in mind, because simple battery is a misdemeanor, but it goes up if you're involved in these factors. It goes up from a regular misdemeanor. So if you're dealing with somebody, arguing with them and they're age 65 or older, all right? If a females who are pregnant at the time and you're arguing with them, that misdemeanor charge can go up. All right. Domestic and family context, spouses, past or present, parents, step-parents, children, roommates, past or present. Note, siblings are legally excluded in Georgia. All right. So brother and sister, sister and sister, brother and brother. Legally excluded. I think they're legally excluded from this simple battery charge. All right. So protected roles and places. So if you get into a situation with the police, with any corrections, transit officers, all right, on the trains, buses, public transit vehicles, buses again. Now, when I say buses on the first one, that's transit officers. You might have police that ride the trains. All right. Then you have the regular police drive the cars, or you in a correctional facility and you get into a simple battery situation with them. With these public figures or roles they play, you can be charged with simple battery. All right. In a public transit vehicle and any stations. So you're on the bus, you get in a heated argument with somebody. Again, you don't have to have a physical injury. All right. You could have just been arguing with the person and poking them in the face, mushing them. But because you're on that bus, or the same thing that might happen on a train. Now, I don't know if taxi cabs count or Ubers count. I don't know if they're going to consider that. And who knows? They might add that down the road. I don't know if that counts. But buses and trains, any type of public transit, if you get into a simple battery situation, then the misdemeanor will go up. I think it's to an aggravated misdemeanor, if I'm not mistaken. All right. So public school employees, if you get into it with a public school employee, you might spit on a teacher. You got simple battery, but it's upgraded simple battery at that point, or aggravated. Amateur sports officials. We all have, or some have kids that play football, basketball, whatever sports your children play, and you get into it with a referee on the game. and you start poking them because you pissed off about they called something on your son or daughter, or you push them, that simple misdemeanor battery is going to be upgraded. All right. Utility workers on official duty, different types of utility workers. You got electric, you got cable company, and so on. You get into it with them, or someone who deals with the traffic lights, a whole bunch of utility workers. Get into it with them and you commit anything physical harm or not physical harm or injury, because let's go back real quick, because like I said, you can have provoking contact and then you can have physical harm. So you commit any one of these on either path 1 or path 2, all right, you're going to have an upgraded simple battery charge. All right, so the consequences, 2 tiers of punishment. The standard misdemeanor applies to base level simple battery. I kind of explained that already. Standard financial fines applied. Potentially county jail time up to 12 months. Okay. That's just with the standard misdemeanor. Now, again, that's all of these right here. What you're seeing on the screen. We already went into it. I'm not going to keep going into it deeper. Just going to show you at this point. But now things going to get aggravated on, let's look at the high and aggravated misdemeanors, okay? Triggered by aggravating factors. The age, remember what I said, 65 or older. If you get into it with somebody 65 or older and you spit on them, punch them, push them, poke them, slap them, kick them, I'm sure they left that out, kicking, you're going to have an aggravated misdemeanor simple battery charge, okay? Significantly heavier financial fines than the standard fines for just the regular simple battery. You're going to have significantly higher fines, heavier, and harsher probation terms and confinement conditions. So keep that in mind as well, okay? The fighting words defense. So if you get arrested, you possibly can have a defense for what you did, but you got to keep some things in mind. Okay. So you poke somebody in the face a few times, you mush them intentionally. They feel like it's provoking contact. They call the police. You get arrested. All right. Then all of y'all go to court and you can put up a defense to why you did this. Okay. So let's get into that. So the fighting words defense is 16-5-28. All right. So if you ever go you want to look that up, that fighting defense for Georgia simple battery, you can look up that OCGA 16-5-25. Look it up and give you some more detail. But we're going to break it down here. So opprobrious or abusive language. All right. Plain English. Severe, extreme verbal provocation from the victim, okay? Allows a defendant to use the victim's own abusive words to justify physical contact. All right, I'm gonna read that again. Allows a defendant, the person who got charged for, let's say they pushed the person, it allows that person to use what the victim's own abusive words. So you got arrested, but you can tell them, well, hey, this person said I was a punk AB, right? And that he'll slap the S out of me. So when he said that, or she said that, then I slapped the S out of them. And that's the only reason why I slapped them, Your Honor. You can use that as a defense, okay? But here's the crucial detail of that. This is never an automatic free pass. So because you go to court, you got arrested, you push the person, smush the person, and you say, well, they said this to me, and that's what made me pissed off and end up pushing them or end up slapping them, or I spit in their face because they said that. Now, you got to keep in mind, that's not an automatic free pass. It is entirely up to the discretion of the jury. All right. So if you want to use that defense in court, if you want to use that the victim told me X, Y, and Z. So that's the reason why I slapped the S out of him, or I slapped the S out of her. You better make it very convincing to the jury or the judge, right? Better make it very convincing. All right. So when extreme words justify physical action, again, the provocation. Someone approaches aggressively, screaming intense profanities. Hey, you MFer, F you, I slap you and your mama. All right. Provocation. Okay. Intense profanities. Someone approaches aggressively, walks up real fast up on you, starts cussing you out, saying things, screaming at you. Direct threats, inches from your face. I'll F you up. I'll slap the A out of you. I'll slap the S out of you. Right? I'll beat you down. All right. When extreme words justify physical action. Somebody saying, I'll beat you down, or I'll take you out, or I'll lay you down right where you stand at. Okay. It might be a reason for you to lay them down right where they stand at, because you don't want to be laid down right where you stand, because you don't know what's going to happen to you after you get laid out. So you might have to lay the person out, and you can use that as a defense if you get arrested. But remember, it's not a automatic free pass card. Okay. So the reaction is you push them after they say all this stuff to you. You push them backward to create space and stop the verbal assault. The defense and the verdict. Your lawyer argues their opprobrious language justified the push. So your lawyer will argue the victims, the person who end up being a victim in this case, and you was the person who got arrested. Your lawyer will argue their opprobrious language justified the push. The jury alone weighs the scenario, okay, or the judge weighs the scenario. So keep that in mind. All right. So common misconceptions that lead to arrest. Here's some common misconceptions. Myth. Here's a myth. I didn't leave a mark on them, so it's not a crime. Now, remember, I told you. But the reality is this: false. Physical pain is not required. Intentional insulting contact. That's not the verbal, but you have to have intentional insulting contact is enough to be charged. So remember that. All right. Here's another myth. They insulted me first, so I had the right to hit them. All right. Now here's the reality of that myth. That is false. You don't have a right to hit somebody just because they insulted you. All right. Using abusive language as a defense is a gamble left entirely to a jury, not an automatic guarantee. So again, you better have some good reasoning for hitting the person just because they started saying insults. If they just using F bombs and B bombs and you ain't S bombs and that's it. They're not saying something like, yo, and they're coming up. You see some other factors in this. Remember, they're coming up on you real aggressive. You probably 6 feet, 8 feet apart, but you're yelling at each other. And all of a sudden they close inches to your face. I'll F you up. Or as they approaching to you, you decide you're going to kick them. That's another scenario. You might be far away from them. They can't touch you. You can't touch them. And you go back and forth with the person. And then they're just throwing F bombs at you. They throwing S bombs, SH bombs at you, sugar honey iced tea bombs at you. All right. And they start approaching you. And before they get close enough, you kick them. In that case, you might not make it with that defense because they just using cuss words. Now, let's change the scenario up just a little bit. You're still a far distance where that person can't touch you and you can't touch the other person. You're going back and forth, throwing SH, sugar honey iced tea bombs, F bombs. You A bomb, you are A. And then all of a sudden, the person says, well, I'll smoke you right here. And then they start walking up on you. Now, they haven't brandished anything to smoke you with, but they said they'll smoke you. And they're coming up to you aggressively, and let's say they're not pulling anything out, but at that point, you might attack them because they could have something on them, and you don't want to take the chance of that person pulling something out. So you attack them immediately as soon as they get within 3-foot rule. Okay, I'll maybe talk about that in another time, but I'll say within range of them getting to you. You might not want to wait for them to pull something out on you. You attack them. That could be possible. You might possibly, I'm not saying don't hold me to it. Don't go around saying, yeah, he said it on this YouTube channel, Norwood Institute of Information and Solutions, and he said X, Y, and Z. I'm just saying that's a better defense compared to the person just threw F-bombs at you, sugar, honey, iced tea bombs at you. I'm just saying, all right? So false, using abusive language as a defense is a gamble left entirely up to the jury, not an automatic guarantee that you're going to be found not guilty and released from jail. All right. So finally, here's the last myth. It was just a minor shove. It's no big deal. So I just pushed the person a little bit, but that's the myth. Here's the reality. False. A minor shove against a pregnant woman. Remember, let's go back real quick. Let's break it down. Let's go back. Remember, aggravating factors that escalate the crime. You have adults age 65 or older, or females who are pregnant at the time. All right. So again, a minor shove against a pregnant woman, an elderly person, 65 or up, or a transit worker. Remember, we talked about that. That can be the person that drives the train, the person that drives the bus or operates the train, drives the bus, the person that opens and closes the doors on the train. Those are transit workers. Automatically elevates to an aggravated crime. So even if you feel you just pushed one of the train conductors, a train driver, or the person that, because normally two, unless the driver does it all now. But back in the day, I know in New York, you had the driver, the operator of the train, and then you had the guy who opens and closes the door. So using that as an example, you might have pushed the guy who closed the door on you, and you pulling the door so hard to get it open. Then finally the guy just decides to open the door up to let you in. And then they go right to your car, they go right to that guy's car that opens and closes the door, and they push him. Minor little push. But because they are a transit worker, you can be charged with aggravated or aggravated misdemeanor of simple battery. Okay. So better keep that in mind. Okay. How to protect yourself from these charges. All right. Here are the solutions. We're going to give you some of these solutions here. All right. Number one, walk away to de-escalate. The safest legal defense to verbal abuse is removing yourself from the situation. So when you got people talking about, F you, you a B, you a hoe, you this, you that. Yeah, you can get upset and start approaching them. But when that happens, things start to get the rumbling, and then things escalate. So one of your ways you could protect yourself is walk away. Hey, okay, whatever. You said my mom is this. Okay, cool. I'll let her know and walk away. But it's hard for people to learn how to master their emotions. Okay, it's hard. So number two, another way to protect yourself from being charged with simple battery in Georgia: keep your hands to yourself. Assume that any intentional, uninvited touch done in anger is illegal in Georgia. Now, I'm going to break down a little bit of personal protection tips to go with this. And you got to be careful, because a lot of people say, a lot of times, if you put your hands up like this in a non-threatening manner, and then a lot of people see what's going on, and you appear to be the person that's non-threatening, be careful what you do with your hands, because putting your hands up like this, in one sense, can protect you, because if the person decides to take a swing, your hands are already prepared to block, or you strike before they get a chance to hit you first. Yeah. And you better have a defense for why you did that. You could, like I said earlier, if they say something intentional or they say something that causes you to strike, you better be able to explain what it was they said. And again, you can't, I suggest that you don't say, oh, they told me F you, or they said I was a B. And because that's not going to cut it for you striking a person because they said that. Again, you can have your hands up in a non-threatening manner. Make sure you don't touch them physically, because maybe even that could be taken, that little, just touching them like this because you mad and you wait a minute and you're going to put your hands on. Even if it's not painful, even if it's not, it didn't injure the person, they can take it as, oh, that was provoking touching, intentional touching to me. So yeah, keep your hands up, but make sure it's not touching the person. All right. And then from there, you can decide if you want to de-escalate and just walk off. You can decide to, if they say something more threatening, well, I'll beat you down, or I'll pull this knife out on you. I got my knife with me. All right. They say that, but they didn't pull it out. You don't know if they have a knife or not. And you decide to take them out right there. And then later you go to court, you say, well, this person said I got a knife on me. And in my world, I do not take chances. I don't play games, because in reality, there are people who are getting stabbed up. They're getting attacked by knives, and I'm not going to be the next one. So I took them down. I flipped them. I knocked them out. I flipped them on the ground, and I kicked them, and they passed out after the kick. Okay. That would be a better defense than just people cussing you out. I'm just saying, okay? So number 3, context. Let's go back to number 2 again real quick. Keep your hands to yourself. I already explained the scenario. Assume that any intentional, uninvited touch done in anger is illegal in Georgia. So the key thing is keep your hands up to protect yourself in case a person getting ready to reach for something, then you're right there to attack them. Cool. I can see you getting off on that. If a person says, I'm going to shoot you, but they ain't pull out a gun yet, and then all of a sudden they get really aggressive, I'll shoot you in the face, and you take them out, however you decide to take them out, you might get away with that using that defense. But if you just here, keep your hands up, but don't touch the person, all right? Number 3, context is everything. I just explain some context, all right? Be hyper aware of your environment. I'm going to say that again. Be hyper aware of your environment. Okay? Schools, public transit, and who you are engaging with, whether it is the elderly person, a pregnant person, utility workers, transit workers, family members, beware of that. All right? So the context is everything. Okay? The bottom line, here are the key takeaways. All right. Here are the key takeaways. Hold on, let me see something real quick. All right. So, number 1, simple battery is about unlawful, intentional contact. Visible injury is not required for a conviction. So remember that you do not have to give a visible injury to somebody. You can hit somebody in the body and leave internal injuries. You can just grab a person, or you can just grab them by the shirt because they piss you off. You might slam them up against the wall. No injuries on their back, no injuries on the front, because you just grabbed their shirt. All right. So visible injury is not required for you to get convicted of a simple battery in Georgia. Number 2, penalties skyrocket from a standard misdemeanor to high and aggravated based on the victim's age, their profession, or relation to you. Remember, we went over this. If they are 65 and older, if they're a pregnant female, and You get into it with them and you push, shove, or you just flat out get real physical and injure them seriously, it's going to go to an aggravated misdemeanor. If you do that to a police officer, correctional facility, a utility worker, transit worker, it won't be a simple battery misdemeanor. It'll be a simple battery aggravated misdemeanor. The fines change from each one, and let's go back. Let me see here. Significantly heavier financial fines than the regular standard misdemeanor of simple battery, and harsher probation terms and confinement conditions. All right. Number 3, extreme verbal abuse can be used as a legal defense, but it leaves your ultimate fate in a jury's hands. So, yeah, I mentioned earlier that somebody might cuss you out and it says extreme verbal abuse. Maybe people can cuss you out so extreme that you felt like you got to hit them, but you still, it's like the puppet is controlling things. You're in the hands of the jury. If you want to use that as a defense, I slapped them because they cussed me out, embarrassed me in front of everybody. Okay, but the jury better make sure the jury thinks that was enough for you to slap a person or punch them out, knock them out, flip them on the ground. All right, you're in the hands of the jury at that point. Number 4, your absolute best defense is self-control. Master your emotions. All right, as Professor David James would say from the Viennese Jitsu Self-Defense Academy. I'll say that. All right. That's a whole nother thing, but I'm just saying master your emotions and walking away from a provocation. So self-control, master your emotions. Okay. And that is it for the breakdown of the Georgia simple battery charge. All right. So I appreciate y'all for coming in, and I hope this has awakened you. I hope you are more informed. All right. You have a new mindset when it comes to you getting into a situation if you happen to be in the state of Georgia. All right. We gave you some things, some solutions, some options that you can do. You might not like the options. I even gave you something if you felt like you still got to be in somebody's face and confront them, or they confronting you. You better have your hands up, so at the very least, if someone throws a strike, you can protect yourself to some degree. All right. But once you have your hands up in a non-threatening manner, but even if you just simply touch a person, because remember, they don't have to have pain and they don't have to have an injury. If you simply just put your hands on their chest, just as a precautionary measure to not get attacked, you still could get charged with simple battery. Now, that's not to say be afraid to do that, because you might need to put your hands on the person's chest or their arms, because you're going to make sure they don't swing on you. So even if you get arrested, go to court and say that. Now, whether or not the jury is going to feel that later on, we don't know. But at least you protect yourself from somebody swinging on you, or the potential of somebody swinging on you and then taking you out. So, but you're taking a chance, all right? So you got to weigh that out. Are you going to protect yourself to the fullest? You're not physically harming them, but you have your hands on top of their arms or their biceps. So that just in case they decide to lift their arm, then you right there, so they can't swing on you. And all you're doing is keeping them from doing that. You're taking a risk of going to jail, but it might be a risk worth taking. Okay. So again, I hope you learned something from this. I appreciate it. Let me know what you think. Put it in the comments if you want to learn more things like this. And of course, we're going to be teaching you a whole host of things, man. You're going to be learning a bunch of things, all right, that you can take away with you at that time. All right. So again, we appreciate it. Be sure to check us out again. And with that being said, this is Norwood Institute of Information and Solutions, and I am out of here. Peace.
Most people think you have to seriously hurt someone to catch a charge. That's not true. In Georgia, something as simple as the wrong kind of physical contact can get you charged with simple battery. And it happens more often than people think. One moment, one decision, one situation. And now you're dealing with the legal system. Courtrooms, charges, consequences. This breakdown shows you exactly what counts and what doesn't, so you don't learn the hard way. Get the full Georgia Simple Battery breakdown right now.